Can everyone hear me okay? Now, can everyone hear me okay? All right. My name is Geoff Mayfield. Anthony Bruno talked me into spending some time with you here. I have to tell you, Anthony's a different character than he was when he was the tech editor for Billboard. Before he was a parent, technical difficulties caused him a much greater challenge than I observed today, so well done. My little brother's growing up. So, when he asked me whether I was willing to help with a panel, I said, well, if we can't do it first thing in the morning when everyone's tired, I'd like to do it at the end of the day when everyone's had a long day of meetings. And they were able to accommodate me. Peoples, you could have chuckled there and it would have helped a little bit. So without further ado, we have a lot of information that we're swimming in. You've heard a lot about data today, what means something, what doesn't. That's what we're here to help you try to figure out. And these are the people who are going to help me do that. Some people I've known for a while, and some people are my new best friends. Starting to my left, one of the labels that Universal Music Group Distribution is proud to distribute from Concord. Please welcome Jason. Jason, tell us about yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Jason Feinberg. I manage digital strategy for the company. So this encompasses direct-to-consumer, e-commerce, CRM, digital business development, and a very heavy focus on metrics and analysis.
And the next fella has been bugging me for a long time, and about every time he gets a job where I can figure out what he's doing, then he goes off and does something else. Please welcome Jay. Jay, tell him about what you're up to now.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jay Frank. I'm the founder and CEO of a new digital record company called Digsin, which stands for Digital Singles. We give away all of our singles for free to anybody who gives us their email address, and we use that data as a starting point to do strategic marketing in the artist development process.
So in one case, you're offering analytics, and in another case, you're an actual label, a conduit to get to market. Jay previously worked at CMT, and before he surprised me by wanting to live in area code 615, he was out here with Yahoo! Another partner of UMGD's, and everyone who purveys music, is in the middle. He's very tall. And he's from the market leader in streaming. Tell us about yourself, Mark.
I'm Mark Keeney. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Rhapsody, #1 digital music service in the U.S., and now most recently in UK and Germany under the Napster brand as well.
And we have an artist manager here to give us some more perspective, and he's really shy, so I hope we can coax him to speak a little bit. Rob?
I'm Rob McDermott. The best thing I feel I've ever done in my life is I managed Linkin Park for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010. Before that, I've managed tons of hard rock and metal bands, White Zombie, Pantera, I was part of their teams, and Korn, and at the firm. And in 1999, I scared a NARM panel by talking about MP3s.
And one of my new acquaintances is down the end, and at first I was both impressed and yet a little bit worried about her humility when I saw that she was touting herself as a genius, and then I realized it's just really part of the name of her company. Sam?
My name is Sam Alken. I am the co-founder and president of Social Genius. We create smart profiles for fans based on what they do on social networks, music devices, and music services. And these profiles are constantly learning and evolving and can be applicable to not just an individual, but a group setting. So we've been at it for 2 years.
So I have in my life been accused of being a baseball fan. And if you know anything about the sport at all, you know it's driven by numbers. And when I was a kid, those numbers were RBIs and home runs and ERA and strikeouts. And then as the sport has developed, as fantasy sports have become a big deal, now we talk about new things like OBP, on-base percentage, or VORP, value over replacement player. So there are also new metrics in what we're dealing with here. You know, once upon a time it was how much did you sell? But now it's how much did you stream? And how many Twitter followers are there out there? And Facebook likes, and all these different numbers. So what we want to try and do in the limited time we have is to kind of parse through what means something and what doesn't. And I'll just ask, and this will be the only time I ask everyone to answer the same question. I'll ask everyone, of the data that you deal with, whether it's something that's been around for a while or something that's new to your life, what do you find important? Jason?
That's a Big question.
Yeah, it's big data.
Yes.
What do you want?
I mean, I guess to sum it up in a very succinct answer, it has to be engagement. I have a million answers to that question, but focusing on the digital side, particularly the digital marketing, social strategy, customer and fan engagement side of things, that's really what it comes down to. And there's a million pieces of data we can look at. Ethan earlier was talking about cumulative data and its decreasing value, and that it's easy to continue to add numbers. What we find challenging and what we find is really the number one indicator of what leads to a transaction is the level of engagement we have with our fans, how they react to the content we put out, how they react to the communication that we put out. And if you look at how we tend to drive them through this sales funnel, we look at it as sort of an evolving sales funnel, a little different than the traditional one. You have these stages where you create awareness, then you create interest, and finally you end up at a stage where a fan makes a choice, and that choice is either transact or not. And what we see more than anything else is the divider, what makes a difference at that fork in the road, is how well that we provide something to them that does result in engagement.
I think at one time our department, I work with the market research and business analysis department at UMGD, and if we ever get enough free time, one of the things we've been wanting to dig into is whether or not these social metrics that we hear so much about lead us to something, or are they following something? Now, my suspicion is, since we call them followers, maybe once you get that many numbers on any social platform, it's because you've already connected with the audience. But Jay, I know that you've been a data head as long as I've known you, or longer than I've known you. What do you find out there that means something to you?
I have to echo Jason. Engagement to me is absolutely the number one thing. We look in, I'm very into artist development, and that's where we're at right now. And as an example, I can take the first 10,000 plays on YouTube that an artist would get. One artist got 12 comments and 30 likes. And another artist with the same 10,000 plays got 70 comments and 140 likes. So I knew that artist was going to be more engaging than the first artist, and that's going to allow me to say I'm going to spend more time and resources working this artist too, and the first artist to say, all right, now what do I got to do to make them more engaging? From my perspective, because part of our business is giving out singles, my biggest hurdle is just making the songs popular. And if they're not engaging enough to get people to talk about them, then I don't have the ability to get them popular. All of my efforts aren't going to work for anything. So everything to me is just about examining every single engagement metric we possibly can. And thankfully now there is a lot of them that actually have significant value.
Mark, you have a little bit different perspective than a label. You have a little bit different perspective than a traditional music industry partner that would sell music. You've got to keep people in the room. So I am curious to know, when you make decisions, whether they're editorial, programming, what is it that means something to you in the way of numbers? What are you looking at?
Well, I would say at an aggregate level, to answer that question more broadly, it's whatever data is actually distinct and most importantly is actionable. Russ brought up some great analogies with the Neil Young fan and their affinity for Foster's beer and other things. The question is, how can you take that and translate it into something that's actionable and purposeful for your business or whatever your goal may be? On the programming side, my primary responsibility is bringing in subscribers, so sourcing new customers out there that fit our profile, our ideal profile. But more on the retention piece, it's taking this mountains of data that we have and finding out what are the key listening behaviors of our best customers, and how can we tailor the product and program accordingly. So that could be by day of week, it could be based on what events are going around, and if the Grammys are playing, or any sort of environmental controls out there too.
I also want to credit Russ for managing to name check Sara Lee jingle. And if you didn't notice it, the New York newspaper cover that he did was as iconic from, the 80s? Was that 76? Ed Koch, amazing. Speaking of amazing, this guy, you've burnt one ARM panel, now you get a chance to burn another one. Tell us what's on your mind in terms of what data means something to you.
You know what, again, I'm going to echo a little bit what they're saying, but take it one step further. When we're creating an atmosphere and experience online and getting people talking, we try to find the biggest evangelizers of those fans, and we keep talking to them and keep them moving the conversation forward when we can. That's the most important thing. It's kind of it's called the old street team. We used to send them stuff in the day, but now we're giving them tasks and keeping them online with what we're trying to keep on point, whether it's sending a video around or anything. And we keep in touch with a few hundred to a few thousand, depending on how many we can really get to, and they keep the conversation moving forward. So I really look at it as evangelizing the excitement of that moment.
Well, to put some close on that, we were talking before the town hall began about the ways in which Lincoln Park, really tried to get in that engagement to really pull them through. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak, and the joke I made to you is I can speak very well about pre-Facebook. But really, a guy named Aaron Ray and Nate Auerbach over at the Collective really do a great job now with them, because I haven't worked with them for a couple of years. But what we did before that to really get everyone going is it was that idea. Anyone that was online, their job was to help. We had our fan club, which always had 60 or 70,000 people. And part of the things that we did is anyone that brought the most people in got dinner with the band. So we found offline and online ways, but they really pushed the message through to bring people into the experience. And that's what it always was. We had a thing called Lincoln Park Network before Facebook ever existed. It's really what it was. It was just a network of kids talking about it. And we had 250,000 people who signed up, just gave us their name and email address, but would keep the conversation going. And again, that's taken the band, and I give them a lot of credit now, to like 40 million likes and all those type of things that they've kind of built up. So it was good to see that conversation kept going, which is what I think is really important to driving them to buy stuff and to get to the content and hone down what you think the conversation is and what people are talking about. We found a lot of our data for what video games do you like and all that just by watching the conversation and by listening to these kids talk. Now it's a lot easier to do. Now there's fewer places to do it, but it's the same theory. It's just all condensed into one area now.
Sam, what's meaningful and what have you incorporated into Social Genius?
We actually became the first music service on the mobile side of Facebook to launch an app, and that was very telling. Initially, when we first came out with our very first app, it was based on what you would listen to on iTunes or iOS devices. Facebook changed a lot of things, and obviously not everybody updates their profiles, and so we had to do a lot more analysis on what was coming in. But for us, the most important data became about the type of users we were attracting and where they were spending most of the time. Was it mobile or web devices? Did we attract a diverse audience? For example, in the first 3 months, we signed up about 150,000 users, and they came from all corners of the world, Egypt to Asia. And the distribution of the audience was incredible, 50-50 practically between women and men, and very nice, I would say, great distribution between the ages, 13 to 55. So that showed us that there's a lot of demand for easy-to-use type of products that give you, and we were in the radio category early on, music that you can get very easily with your friends showing up as different profiles, clicking on them and launching a music session. We realized that we were tapping into a very diverse audience that way.
You and Jake both mentioned something I think is kind of important in how slippery social metrics can be. What does it mean if someone hits like? I know that when I first became a Facebook user, I was probably more prone to like things. Just as someone who bought their first DVD player or their first MP3 player buys a lot of music, you're liking things, and then the more you're into it. So tell us a little about your perspective on what we've seen from those conventional platforms.
I think that everything really varies. Actually, the biggest, in the music ecosystem, the biggest worry is that endless loop of everybody appeasing everybody else. So you could actually have a situation where perhaps the record label is seeing that there's not enough Facebook likes, and so they go and they buy a bot to go buy a bunch of Facebook likes, which then convinces the manager that something's happening, which then creates this spiral of assumption that there's actually something going on when it's really not. I think people have tried to monetize and say, well, is a Facebook like worth this dollar, and is a Twitter follower worth this dollar? And again, it's one of the reasons why I go back to the engagement part, because I don't really look at that. I mean, I think that the biggest advent of Facebook that's been helpful has been the metrics that show how many people are sharing. And when you actually own the page, I never pay attention to how many people like it. I pay attention to all of the data of saying, we did this kind of post, and that got 2.5% of the people who like the page to click through. And then we did this kind of post, and that got 0.1%. So I can say, okay, now I know the kind of posts that engage the audience, and that's going to cause it to spread. Or this post got this many shares, or this video got this many shares. So the top level stuff is interesting to get people in the door, but from a day-to-day perspective, I don't give it much notice.
Yeah, Jay's illustration amuses me because it's kind of a reminder that the music industry tends to repeat its former tricks. Before we had broadcast data systems or media-based to track airplay, the practice at a record company would be that the promotion department would hype airplay. You would see reports of airplay, and so in a meeting, hey, we're getting big airplay in Seattle. But they wouldn't see concurrent sales happening in the Seattle market. They weren't seeing product shipped to that market. So what happened here? And they would actually go ahead and send product based on this. So when I was with Billboard when BDS first launched, the biggest fans at first of that radio promotion tool weren't the promotion departments. It was the sales department, because they finally had the monkey off their back. Then in a meeting when someone said, hey, I was getting heavy airplay in Seattle, they say, oh yeah? Since when's 12 plays a week heavy airplay, So I think that unfortunately we see some of that happening with these newfangled toys as well. In terms of the engagement, what is it that you're looking for, Jason?
I think the way I look at it, it's actually, let me add to what he said and transition to that answer, is almost everything we've talked about, a Facebook like, a Twitter follower, an email subscriber, any of these pieces of data, in my view, they're actually worthless until you can steer that into some form of call to action, some transaction. And that's, to answer the question, what we pay attention to, what we do see of value. I think that the point you made about it's the doorway. The doorway itself has no value until you actually steer that person to something you're trying to achieve. Now, what you're trying to achieve is the ultimate answer to that question, or that's what defines it. Most people in this room, in this conference probably, we could all agree, until a sale is made, until there's a financial transaction, nothing else matters. That's what keeps the lights on. On the other side of things, if you're a fan, all of that matters, right? The numbers, the community, the feeling one gets from being part of music and a fan and movement. Now, from the label side of things, particularly on the strategy side, I find myself in the middle. Of course, we need everything we've been talking about. We need likes. We need email subscribers. We need all these different points of data. But unless we're working with all the other departments to align our goals, and ultimately, being a record label where our lights stay on by selling content, that's what matters, right? And I find myself often landing more on the fan side of the equation of how do we create an experience of value and worry about money later. Now, my CEO might disagree with that a little bit, and understandably, my CFO more so. But I think that's what we pay attention to on my side, on my team, is are we creating an experience that, based on what we see our fans want, the metrics we have access to, the engagement that we see people respond to, is that leading us to a transaction of some sort? A transaction can be many things. Certainly financial is typically what we fall back on as the default, but a share, a post, feedback, user-generated content. There are so many ways fans can transact with us. So that's really what we're focusing on. Are we shuffling fans all the way from awareness all the way through to some form of transaction?
What about an old-fashioned metric like, in today's universe, one of my favorite colleagues likes to say that the best predictor of sales is sales. If you have an artist who's already had a track record, then seeing how that artist has sold before can help you. Or if you already have a track out from an album, whether it's from an established artist or a new artist, particularly if it's an established artist, that the sales trajectory of that track that precedes the album, what about a metric like that? Is that too overlooked? Are people not paying enough attention to things that we've lived with for a long time?
I'll take that again if you don't mind.
Well,
I have a short answer.
that's fine.
I think that's where we start. That's where it always starts, is the same metric we've looked at since the beginning of time, sales. That's what we've always had, and that's where it's always led. What we're starting to do now is back out of that and try to find predictive instead of reactive methods to figure out what actions we can take that will continue to lead to sales.
Rob?
I mean, it's kind of along those lines, but you start sales because, I mean, I think Ethan said a little earlier, I mean, you know, data and all that information drafts that he'll use product, but I use art. Use great art, right? If you keep creating great pieces of art that you can sell and you can keep it going, sales are only the beginning point. You then have to take all of that information and go, for the few weeks before you put a record out, are those people still there? Are they still engaged? Do they still care? And you find that out through various different, you know, are all the fans coming back? Are you getting the excitement level in this market and that market? And you have to find that out. But yeah, I agree that it's really the basic level. I mean, people use it in the physical world to find out how much they're going to bring in, you know, and stuff like that. But you can't, I mean, look at some of these artists that go from, you know, and everyone goes, oh, it's because, you know, record sales have dropped 50, 60%. And you know what? They have, or they've moved online. So you can't really say, or a store, a retailer is only keeping 2 weeks now versus the 10 they used to 10 years ago, you know, in stock. I mean, you have to keep all that into consideration. So, you know, you have to use it as like, okay, people do care. So now in the weeks leading up to, how much do we make them care, and are they still gonna care in those leading weeks?
Sam?
I have an interesting perspective because of our technology probably, but we actually can figure out who's in this room and find the intersection of their taste and give music back to that particular crowd. And that implies a lot of things. I could know exactly who's in the room, what they're listening to, who they're with, essentially, and account for music that way. So the definition of music sales changes when you go to that kind of an environment. And now with all the technologies that we're able to put together, we're practically there. It'll just maybe take another couple of months and you'll see this in reality.
Well, yours and other services, including some that we've kicked the tires on, Dave Bakula referred to this earlier today. They're trying to look for engagement beyond the obvious things. Where do they go? What do they do? And that's the kind of behavior that can really be more instructive. I'm curious, Mark, I know that to some degree music discovery is one of the things that's attractive about Rhapsody, but you're very editorially driven, and I would imagine that when you're trying to figure out what to put facing when someone first comes to the site, you've got to have artists who are compelling. And what metrics are you looking at, aside from your own streaming information? What metrics might you look at to make those decisions?
Well, I think, I mean, yeah, as opposed to what was popular, you know, say a year ago, or, you know, the last album, you know, ranked at such and such a level. It's going on to what are the other trends that are going on in the time too. Again, it may be not just new releases. It could be more, like I said, life events. You know, unfortunately, like the passing of MCA and so forth. There's an organic. The audience will organically find that music. But to our customer base, we want to make it easier, for example. Like here's a homage to the Beasties with a playlist of all their music and great music, and you'll see that rise in our charts as an example. But it also could be just more about seasonality. People are starting to think about summer, you know, so starting to package up those types of music or those types of trends or genres, as well as just throwing out a few, you know, hidden gems out there, because the audience really, our customer base really loves the aha moment that comes with the musical finds. It's not just the top tracks. Everybody's listening to that. It's finding that one particular track or album and broadcasting that out to friends and so forth. I think, going back to an earlier point about, what's the power or what's the value of a like and so forth. I mean, I would say it's up to every company or business or management team to figure out what it is for their own, as opposed to continually looking out and saying, hey, analysts, tell me what a like is worth in dollars and cents, because it's completely different per. And then secondly, it's the thing with social media too is it has to come across as natural and organic for it to really catch fire. I think it's a lot how you were, seeding the market back in the day with Linkin Park and so forth. You've got to provide the tools, but then you got to let it happen, and that's where you have, I think,
Sincerity.
great success.
I can fake that. So I'm mindful of the fact that this was called a town hall. So I'll continue asking questions, but if Anthony's in the room or if someone else from the NARM staff could grab the roving mic, I wouldn't mind getting some questions from the floor. And see, I got a taker right there. Is Anthony here? Okay, I'll be my own guy. Sound guy, does this work? Hello? Can we make this work? Do we have a sound guy? Let's see. See if it's on, David. Yep. There we go. And oh, by the way, this is a town hall, but I want the questions to be in the form of a question instead of a sermon, because sometimes we run into that at conventions. And who are you, and what's your question?
My name is Kermit Henderson. Been in the music business for 39 years. Been a member of NARM since 1990. Come from retail. I've done some everything. My sermon is over. My question is, actually, it's a comment, and I noticed the one gentleman was commenting on the different things about the Facebook likes, the YouTube thing, and I found his comment very interesting. And I just want to mention that if when he was referring to, like, for example, if two people had the 10,000 views and he's not looking at the views per se, he's looking at the comments and the likes or things like that. And I think that's very important because you did mention about different people being able to get robots and doing this and doing that. And I used to tell people back in the day when MySpace was real hot that, guys would, I'd wake up the next day and somebody had 1,000 plays or something on their player, and I would tell these guys, I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay, you trying to get a record deal or something, and you got 900,000 page views, you got 1 million plays on your player, but you only have 8,000 friends, and not that many comments, So it's like I said, how do you think that looks? That 900,000 people have been to your page, but only maybe 8,000 want to be your friend, and only 2,000, cared enough to comment. So I just wanted to just kind of say that really caught my ear, from an industry person. Basically, just wanted to say that as opposed to a question, but I do believe that that's important, and I just wanted to hear things like that moving forward. That's actually like the fact of what's really happening in the music business moving forward is how you can tell something from fact versus just fiction.
Well, I think on that point, another thing that is really important to be looking at is your own analytics through the website. And one thing that I think a lot of people overlook is where the traffic comes from. You can do things so that you can create short links on Twitter and Facebook so you can track exactly which of your posts are actually delivering things. But it's also actually looking at other areas. And again, in terms of engagement, that's what you want. I launched my label in January, and I got a front page of Time's Techland section on Time Magazine's website. Now that impressed my mom, but it didn't impress my business because it was the 20th biggest traffic driver to the site, whereas the biggest traffic drivers was a tech site in the UK that I'd never heard of, a tech site in Argentina that I'd never heard of. Billboard was in the top 10, so you guys, that worked well too. But it wasn't all the usual drivers. And that's informed my business moving forward to say, I'm not going to spend my time worrying about getting my artists right now on David Letterman or even getting my artists in Spin Magazine or quite frankly even in Pitchfork. I'm spending my time saying where are things at a different level that have more passionate engagement because that is ultimately going to drive more business and traffic, and the metrics informed that decision.
You're nodding your head, Jason. Anything to add?
I think that sums it up very nicely. I mean, I think that's one of the most critical points when we're talking about data in our industry is that every artist is different. This is entertainment. This isn't toothpaste. Right? Toothpaste is a relatively stable business. We all have teeth, essentially, and one can use metrics to predict how much toothpaste we're going to sell next year.
Everyone here have teeth? Okay. I think there's more here than admitted to it.
But I think you understand what I'm saying, that in our industry, it's such a subjective thing. It's subjective and objective at the same time, and simple numbers can't really encompass all the different subtleties of what drives traffic, what drives interest. There's a phrase in the business intelligence world that I think of all the time.
Is that an oxymoron?
Like military intelligence? Yeah. Single version of the truth. This phrase, this dictates a lot of the thinking that we do in my department. This idea that we need to centralize our beliefs and our information that drive our actions. And we have long ago accepted that there is no single, there's no magic bullet. There's no dollar value to a like. There's no, guarantee that any certain number of fan base equals any certain numbers of transactions. And again, it's because what we do, it's art, right?
Let's step further away from the toothpaste one more, which is something that always interested me when I managed charts at Billboard and saw all the different efforts that record companies would go through to influence, especially for that first year that I was album chart manager before SoundScan, and I would see all the efforts or hear about all the efforts that record companies would go to make things look more popular than they were. And that is this long-held notion, and it might sound odd for someone who worked with charts longer than most NARM interns have been alive, but I honestly don't think, I think they help discovery, but they don't make you buy something. They don't make you like something. If you find out that someone's in the top 10 who you didn't hear before, you might be curious to find out what they sound like. But you're not going to buy them because they were number 1, or you're not going to buy them because they were number 7. That happens to be my belief. So I think that both of our panelists on the end talked about trying to find those people who influence things. But beyond that, beyond finding those people who do kind of knock the stack over, it really doesn't. Does anyone buy music because it's a certain number on a chart?
I don't think they do. I think there are two things in human nature, and we got to remember human nature as to how people like a band, absorb a band, always have gotten into a band hasn't changed. Just because we're delivering it to them in a different way, in a faster way of doing it, the way that people like something, I don't believe has changed. So two things that I believe fans don't want. They don't want to be, they want to be surprised, and they want to find something, and they want to be blown away by it, and they don't want to be used. Those are the two things that I truly believe that if you can adhere to those when you're working with your fans, I never overly upsell to my new fans almost immediately. I try to give something and bring them in, and then later on I'm selling something to them inadvertently because they like what it is. I never try to sell, push in their face because they're going to feel used. And you don't want that. You want them to go, you know what, these guys are cool. They actually bring a really good vibe to what we're doing, right? And I'm not saying I'm not selling. Of course, my ultimate goal is to make money off of it too. I mean, but you can't make anyone feel, you'd feel really uncomfortable. It's like the peddlers on the street, or just the hustlers who are always there. You get away from me. You don't want to be felt that way about it. And then the other side is when all of a sudden someone tells you about something, or you're happening upon something, you're like, oh my God, that's great music. Just that feeling that you have, it drives that, it's that gut soul feeling that we all have when we love something so much. I think that we have to really keep putting forth that effort, and I think you can. I think you could start the conversation, you can let people evangelize, you can really kind of feed that and take the information off of what they're giving you to help feed that system. I mean, we're the only, and as an industry, we're the only industry that pays to hype ourselves. It's kind of really funny. I mean, we've been doing it forever.
you know?
Goes back to that old radio example, and Ms. Newman, you were enjoying that one. Were you stretching, or did you, Anthony? Okay.
I got it.
I was going to talk to you about that, but we'll pick that up later, Deb.
Hi, my name is Debbie Newman, and I'm going to make an analogy from the old days when maybe some of the people here still were dealing with retail. I mean, you look at what's going on with, you know, how the internet is both a promotion and a revenue-generating vehicle. In the old days, radio was just promotion, and, you know, you put your posters up and you try to get people to go into stores and actually buy the record. So now today, the web is both the promotional vehicle, but it's also the revenue vehicle, because streaming is a revenue source and advertising is a revenue source, and it's not just buying. So now you have data. In the old days when I worked at CBS Records and we got 3-foot-high printouts of sales by account, by market that sat there until the week's worth piled up, and then they went in the trash, and then the next week's worth came up. All that data was not really good for anything unless you actually did something with it, where you made actionable marketing decisions about where you spent your money, or where you focused on radio and what markets you went after, and the artist was on tour, and it all really was all about the retail sale. So I thought we were originally talking about revenue when I walked in. I'm curious how all this data, when you know who's listening to what, and all the engagement and all the likes and all of that, you're not just driving people to iTunes to download it, or to, I don't know, Best Buy to buy it. Now you're driving people to listen to it, because the more they listen to it, the more money is generated, both in the publishing and in the master recording. So the whole business model now change is really, the only one here who really can use all this data as the retailer is Rhapsody, because you're the one that has the storefront. You have the window, basically, you know, buying the windows in Tower Records in the old days. So, you know, how are you guys actually using this data to drive revenue, not just drive sales, but to actually drive revenue? What kind of decisions are you making based on data that's helping you make more money, just break more artists and make more money?
Yeah, great question. What we're fundamentally doing is really, as opposed to the freemium approach of just sort of open up the doors and let people find, and eventually they'll figure out the model, we actually take a look at our customers at a really close level, on a demographic level, behavioral characteristics, all sorts of just mountains and mountains of data, third party, our own, and so forth, and find out where these people live and breathe and what they do, and then take that and apply that into our marketing practices so we can find out what is the best way to target our longtime customers, high LTV. But having said that, that doesn't always answer the whole question. It also depends on the mode or the medium itself, because you'll get different response rates. So you may find in one channel you get a overwhelming response rates, but these are customers that don't stick around with the service, say, as long as others. And so we've done a lot of testing up the top of the funnel, if you will, at bringing people in. And now we're at this point of like, okay, how can we really munch this together with the engagement of within the service, so keep people around even longer and really pinpoint what are these profiles. The key, though, and also what's the most optimal target customer, because when you go for one customer, you're going to have collateral damage and get other like customers as well. But the key with our service, and since it's been around 10 years and it's evolved, that there's clusters. There's not one target customer. There's just different distinct groups. And so it's finding the right marketing channel or medium to go target those different groups is one way where we're using a lot of that data. And then also, there's all sorts of just fun, interesting ways to kind of, cut the data further of, what genres do our best customers like to listen to? Well, it turns out all. Those that listen to the wider breadth tend to be the best customers around. Makes sense. We're incenting people basically to listen to more and more music than just one particular genre or just whatever they've purchased just to date or whatever's in their collection.
I'd like to augment the answer to Debbie's question from a manager's perspective and from a label's perspective. So just quickly, what could you add to that, Rob? Okay, you think about it while Jason talks.
All right, this is fun. Fun is the key word. This is what I love. This is what I geek out about, is figuring out how does all this data translate to actual revenue? And again, this is what we've been talking about most of this discussion. We have access to thousands of points of data for any of our artists, right? We've built this technology stack using everything from Next Big Sound and BuzzDeck and Rapleaf and Salesforce and Google Analytics, and I mean the list goes on and on. This is what I love. And if you build that correctly, you can drill down to any point of data and find any answer you're looking for if you know the question. And this is the key. The key to everything, at least everything I've said, and I would think people would agree what we're talking about, you have to know the question you're looking to answer. This is the one thing we have not gotten to as a science in this industry, is data cannot tell us the question to ask. It can provide the answer. And this is where if you have your technology stacked correctly and you know where you're looking, you can find it. For example, if the question is, how many clicks does the average user, how many times do they click on our website before they transact, and where do they fall off if it's too many clicks? That's a very valuable question, because if you can find that answer, you can structure your entire e-commerce solution to work within that. Yes?
Can I ask just a quick follow-up? So actually, that was one of my questions.
I feel like John Kennedy. Follow up, Mr. President.
Do you use data more for your direct-to-consumer stuff, or do you use it when you're talking and working with online retailers, for example, or physical retailers for that matter, in terms of the data translating to, other than your own direct-to-consumer, your websites and your own e-commerce efforts? I'm just curious. It's interesting. Like, I don't know what the revenue breakdown is, what you do direct-to-consumer. I'm assuming Concord actually does a lot.
We do. We get a lot more mileage out of the properties we control, just given if we're working directly with the artist and we have access to all of their social properties, their official properties, any partner sites. There's so much data and so much control that that's the ultimate use case here. When it comes to our partners, our retailers, even other departments within the label, right? We try to work with our radio team, our publicity team, our sales team to provide them data that shows, based on the actions we're taking, our social media marketing, our email communications, here are indicators we are seeing that might be influencing your offline strategies or your radio strategies. So the idea is to really complete the circle and really build that ecosystem so that every person in the chain derives benefit from the data.
Well, I'd like to take your answer and steer it in a different direction. And that is one of the risks that we have in our group, whether it's looking at the numbers of the business in the business analysis department or looking at consumer behavior, is with all the data we have to play with that we didn't have before, isn't there the risk that we start answering questions that don't really bring consequence? Isn't there the risk that we entertain ourselves with, oh, let's correlate this to that, and then what? I mean, how do you differentiate what's worth the effort and what's not? And I'd like more than one answer to this.
I think, revenue is a key component of that. Looking at things such as, as an example, when you're using things such as Google AdWords, or Facebook ads, the tendency is to go towards saying, okay, well, am I looking at this as a cost per click, or is this just an awareness thing, and am I looking at it as a cost per impression? The reality is that you need to look at it as a cost per acquisition. And that's not just somebody that says that, okay, I paid to get them to click to the site. Did I pay to get them to click to the site, and then did they actually do the action that I needed them to do, whether that's sign up to a mailing list, whether that's buying a product? That's the key factor. I did an ad that I tested for my site to get people to sign up. And we had a tremendous response rate. We had a 3.5% click-through rate on the ads at 3 cents a click. Google can't get much better than that. That's pretty much top of the line for them. However, I was unable to maximize the site, so my cost per acquisition turned out to be $1. And so it was a lousy ad. Now, if I was sitting in a record label meeting and I wanted to impress my boss, I'd go in there and say, 3.5%, 3 cents, we're killing it. And then they'd go and up my budget. But it's a lousy ad because it was a lousy cost per acquisition. So I think that it's, I think you're right. We do run that risk. And if you look towards the revenue trail in some way, shape, or form, it's helpful. Another thing to do, I think that people don't spend enough time on analytics. We're talking a lot about getting people to buy and things like that. They don't spend enough time looking at the analytics of how you frame your YouTube video. How do you frame your Facebook page? forgetting about just how you frame the website, because you can do little tweaks on each one that can mean mountains of difference in terms of engagement and revenue. And yet most people don't even take the time to look at those, to just say, hey, if we move this photo over here, what might that do? Or if we change this press photo to this press photo, let's try it and see what happens. Yeah, occasionally sometimes that leads you down a rabbit hole that doesn't really have any impact whatsoever, except you found something cool. But a lot of times when you're saying, okay, our end goal is to get to those revenue and engagement metrics, then you'll end up finding a lot.
Yeah, one thing I'd add there, I mean, in our business, we will actually map our bidding strategies on keyword clusters down to the lifetime duration of those keyword clusters. So you know that you're not overbidding and so forth. It's not necessarily applicable to all the industries here, but the more you can drill down and be scientific about it, the better off you are.
I think we'll have to let that be the last word here. It's been a great
Cocktail
panel.
time?
It's 6 o'clock. There is a cocktail open. We opening cocktail up at the pool. So if you run, you might get first in line right now. But I'm sure you folks will take a few questions from the audience when sort of offline if they want to mill about and ask a few things.
I think it'd be very appropriate to entertain those questions with cocktails in hand.
Cocktails in hand, absolutely. So, folks, we have cocktail parties upstairs at the bar. Please, big round of applause for the panelists here. I think they did a great job.